This presentation is for case number 811-21-210-000-210-TYP4, Proposed Amendments to Springfield's Floodplain Overlay District. The request before the Commission consists of proposed amendments to Springfield's Development Code, which will allow the city to continue participating in the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA's National Floodplain Insurance Program. The proposed amendments would update Section 3.3-400, the Floodplain Overlay District, and Section 6.1-100, the Definitions section. This request is reviewed as a Type 4 legislative amendment to the Development Code, which requires this Commission's review and recommendation to the City Council and Lane County Board of Commissioners. First, I'd like to provide some background on the National Flood Insurance Program, or NFIP. It was created in 1968 by the U.S. Congress and is administered by FEMA. The program's objectives are to ensure new buildings will be free from flood damage, to prevent development from increasing damage on existing property, and to ensure the natural and beneficial functions of the floodplain are preserved. Participation in the NFIP gives members of Springfield's community access to federally backed flood insurance. Flood insurance is required for federally backed loans to purchase or build structures within the floodplain. Participation in the NFIP also ensures Springfield remains eligible for federal disaster assistance in the event of a flood. In order to be eligible for participation in the NFIP, communities must adopt and enforce an ordinance that regulates development in the floodplain. On the slides is a brief history of Springfield's regulation of development in the floodplain since 1985, when the city joined the NFIP and adopted floodplain regulations as part of its zoning code. You can see more details of this history in the staff report. I'm just going to highlight a few points. In 1987, Springfield revised its floodplain management regulations to remain eligible for the NFIP. The floodplain management regulations were then revised 7 more times through 1999. Most of these changes were minor, but there were substantive changes made in 1997, again to maintain eligibility for participation in the NFIP. In 2007, Springfield reformatted the Springfield Development Code, which updated the floodplain management regulations to Section 3.3-400, where they're currently located. Staff is unaware of any changes to the Floodplain Overlay District section that have occurred since then. Updates to the regulations are needed once again to ensure the city is in compliance with the current minimum standards required by FEMA for continued participation in the NFIP. This map shows the areas within Springfield and its UGB that are within the Floodplain Overlay District in black crosshatching. As you can see, most of the Floodplain Overlay District surrounds the Mackenzie and Willamette rivers, although there are some areas along other streams and channels in the city as well. The proposed amendments would not make any changes to FEMA's floodplain maps or the boundaries of the Floodplain Overlay District. The proposed amendments would apply to new construction and development, substantial improvements, and conversions from residential to non-residential uses, and vice versa, occurring in the Floodplain Overlay District. Existing structures located within the floodplain would not need to be brought into compliance with the new standards unless they are converted to a new use or there is substantial improvement. New construction or development includes new structures as well as other development such as bringing fill onto a property in the floodplain. Substantial improvements include any reconstruction, rehabilitation, addition, or other improvements of a structure where the cost equals or exceeds 50% of the market value of the structure before the start of construction of the improvement. I'll be discussing what conversions mean in the key changes portion of this presentation. The proposed amendments are based on the Oregon Model Flood Hazard Management Ordinance, which became effective in October 2020. This is a model code developed by DLCD and approved by FEMA that incorporates both state and federal laws. Aligning with the model code language will bring the city into compliance with the standards required to continue its participation in the NFIP. In order to better match the model code, some sections of the code have been rearranged, some have been reworded, and some added to match the language of the model code. A definition section has been added to 3.3-400 with all the definitions that are applicable to the floodplain regulations. Accordingly, definitions and portions of definitions that are applicable only in the Floodplain Overlay District have been removed from the definitions section of 6.1-100, as you can see in the packet. The city has not proposed any amendments which are not required to meet the minimum standards for participation in the NFIP. Where the city had already adopted a higher standard, these were kept when still in compliance with NFIP requirements. The section's numbering and formatting has been updated to match the format that will be used in the Springfield Development Code update project. I'd like to highlight a few of the key changes the proposed amendments would make if adopted. The proposed amendments name the permit issued for development in the Floodplain Development Permit, and add or update language throughout Section 3.3-400 to reflect this. The current code only mentions the Land Drainage and Alteration Permit, or LDAP. Requirements for this permit are contained in the Springfield Municipal Code. In most cases, an applicant would be required to obtain both a floodplain development permit and an LDAP. The proposed amendments help to clarify this distinction. The example on the slide shows one area of the code where this change is proposed, highlighted in yellow. The proposed amendments add language from the model code that more thoroughly explains the city's obligations in administering the floodplain development regulations. The titles of the added sections are shown on the slide. The proposed language outlines determinations the city must make when reviewing development permit applications in the floodplain, explains what information related to floodplain management the city must keep and make available to the public, and explains circumstances under which the city must provide information to other entities such as the Federal Insurance Administrator or adjacent communities. In alignment with the model code, the proposed amendments add language requiring the city to conduct substantial damage inspections for any event, natural or otherwise, that damages a structure. This expands the requirement beyond just the post-flood damage inspections that are currently codified. These proposed changes are highlighted in yellow on the slide. If determined substantially damaged, a property owner would need to bring the structure into compliance with the floodplain development requirements when making any repairs, since these would be considered substantial improvements. In alignment with the model code, the amendments add language that requires the structure to come into compliance with floodplain development requirements when it is converted from a residential use to a non-residential use or vice versa. Examples of this might include conversion of a duplex to a commercial space or a detached garage to a studio apartment. The sections of the code where this change is proposed are on the slide, again highlighted in yellow. The proposed amendments change the anchoring standards for manufactured dwellings as well as the measurement standards for the height manufactured dwellings must be at. Anchoring standards specific to manufactured dwellings are moved from the general anchoring section of the code to the manufactured dwelling section and are updated per the model code so that there is only one anchoring standard regardless of the location of a manufactured dwelling. Instead of requiring the lowest floor of the manufactured dwelling to be elevated to 1 foot above base flood elevation, as is in the current code, amendments would require the longitudinal chassis to be above base flood elevation and the electrical crossover connections to be 1 foot above base flood elevation. The approval criteria for this proposal are contained in the Springfield Development Code section 5.6-115, which covers amendments to refinement plans, plan districts, and the development code. They are shown on the screen and require conformance with the Metro Plan, applicable statewide statutes, and applicable statewide planning goals and administrative rules. The findings for these approval criteria can be found in the staff report. Again, this request is reviewed as a Type 4 legislative amendment to the Springfield Development Code, which requires review and a recommendation by the Planning Commission and ultimately adoption of ordinance by City Council. Since the floodplain regulations apply to areas outside the city limits, the Urban Transition Agreement with Lane County also requires that the Lane County Board of Commissioners co-adopt the amendments for them to apply outside city limits. The next step is for the Planning Commission to make a recommendation to the City Council and Board of Commissioners, who will hold a joint work session and joint hearing on proposed amendments on December 13th.